Namaste. So in this video, I'm going to do something really important. I'm going to bust the myth that all religions are the same. Now, this is a myth that many Hindutva people even promote, and it just is false. So that's what this video is to do. It's to bust this myth. But before I do this, I have a request. Please subscribe and ring the bell icon on my channel. Please follow me on Facebook and on Twitter, English_Behen. And please share it with your friends and family, because this message really is very important. So to begin with, when we say all religions are the same, mistakenly, what do we mean by the word religion? So I think most people would agree that the word religion means that you are believing in and worshipping a higher, invisible power, something beyond this material world that we see day to day. And that this higher power is responsible for creation, for maintenance of this reality that we're in, this existence, and there is some destruction event. And so in that way, Hinduism is very much a religion, right? But the confusion, I guess, comes in where we see that the word religion, where it stems from the Latin word religare, which means to bind. And that means to bind to a dogma, like a blind belief, or to a particular prophet, or to a certain book. And that's where, I guess, the fact that Hinduism maybe isn't a religion comes about. Because in Hinduism, you're not bound to a blind belief or to a certain prophet. There are so many devas, so many avatars of the devas to worship. There are the Vedas, which are eternal knowledge. They're not actually the books themselves, it's the knowledge within the books. And there are so many Shastras, so many scriptures. And ultimately, Hinduism promotes inquiry, self-discovery, discovery of the universe, discovery of the truth. So in that way, maybe Hinduism isn't a religion because you're not bound. And when you consider that, for example, in Christianity, there are these 10 very black and white commandments, that is a clear demonstration of being bound to a belief system, a very rigid belief system, quite a narrow-minded belief system, compared to Hinduism, where you are worshipping just intelligence and truth and observation of the universe and your own experience and the experience of rishis in millennia gone by. So in this way, Hinduism is much more like science, really. In fact, I say it's more than science, it's science plus plus. If you have the Abrahamic faiths on the one end of a spectrum, where you are having blind faith in a set of rigid commandments, even when scientific observation is telling you that they're false or that they just don't apply, for example, in the modern world anymore, which is not relevant, that's at one end of the spectrum. Then we move over across the spectrum and we have what we call, what we think of as modern day science, using telescopes and microscopes to make observations on the world and, coming up with conclusions on the mechanics, the physical mechanics of the world. But at the other end of the spectrum, we have Hinduism, which is science plus plus, because it makes observations on the world, yes, and it makes them very accurately, and I'll be talking more about that later. But it also goes much further beyond making observations on the physical world, the material world, to making observations and experiences on almost like your inner world, your internal world, your experiences of Bhagwan, of the spiritual world. So it's way beyond science, it's science plus plus. The reason I bring up this discussion about religion is because I hear very often Hindus saying that Hinduism isn't a religion. And as I said, there is an argument for that because religion comes from the word to bind and Hindus aren't bound. But the danger comes when they take it to the extent of saying, well, Hinduism isn't a religion, it's a way of life. Now, all religions are a way of life. All religions will determine the sort of clothes you wear, the food you eat, how you spend your spare time, at what times of day, in what format you pray. So to say that Hinduism isn't a religion but a way of life, I feel it's quite demeaning, because all religions are a way of life. And actually, in many ways, Hinduism is the least just being a way of life of all the religions, because there is such an appreciation for the depth of the spiritual connection in Hinduism. When we're saying, it's just a way of life, we're talking about quite superficial things, what you're eating, how you're dressing. And actually, Hinduism is so much more than that. It's so much about your connection with Bhagwan, that spiritual depth. So saying it's just a way of life is just completely ignoring that whole aspect of Hinduism, which is by far the biggest part of Hinduism. And the thing is that when people say it's just a way of life, they are undermining their faith, and they are actually aiding conversions. Because missionaries, when I did some research last year on the tactics of missionaries in India, I found one of the tactics they use is to tell Hindus, well, you don't even have a proper religion, you just have a way of life, a culture. You need a proper religion. So that's one of the dangers to saying that Hinduism is just a way of life. The other is internationally. When, for example, at school, I didn't learn anything about Hinduism. I learned about all the other major world religions, so Sikhism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, but I didn't learn anything about Hinduism. And that's because if you look at the school syllabus, it says that teachers need to teach about a variety of the world religions. And if Hindus themselves are saying, we're not a religion, we're a way of life, there is no need for British schools to be teaching children about Hinduism at all. So all those British children then don't even have the opportunity to know about Hinduism, let alone to discover its beauty for themselves. And it's so sad, because I feel that so many British people, not just British people, people around the world would get so much benefit from becoming Hindus, but obviously they first need to know it exists. So, like in a strategic sense, it's important that we call Hinduism a religion. So, in this modern world, what is respected? It's structure, organisation, and power. And if we can put on this united front as Hindus, as unapologetic, proud Hindus who have deep faith in their religion, the world is going to respect us so much more and take us more seriously. And that is then the first step to millions, billions of people across the world having the opportunity to become Hindus, and ultimately then for the world to be a much happier, peaceful, more sustainable place to live. So when we look at how Hinduism sits against the Abrahamic faiths, we'll see there's massive chasm. In fact, Hinduism is much more similar to other ancient faiths, such as paganism, or the faith of the ancient Egyptians, or of the Aztecs, in that we worship everything in nature, and that we experience this intimate connection with Bhagwan, or God. It's not that God is a separate entity looking down on us and passing judgment, and that we live in fear of him, because in Abrahamic faiths it's a man. We are connected, we're all unified, it's a single consciousness. So we have that very much in common with paganism, with the Aztecs, with the ancient Egyptians. And that's completely the opposite, obviously, to the Abrahamic faiths. So in that way, Hinduism is polytheistic, that it worships the whole diversity of nature. Surya Dev, the sun, is worshipped. Ma Ganga, a very sacred river, is worshipped. So in that way, Hinduism, like the other ancient religions which are extinct, is polytheistic. But at the same time, Hinduism is monotheistic. And in fact, it's where the monotheism in Judaism, in Christianity and Islam, that's how it came about. It's because the understanding of us all being one, that polytheism unites in a monotheism, that came from Bharat, from India. It's from Hinduism that wisdom has come, that this truth has come. And there are so many avenues of evidence for the Hinduism being the truth. The first is obviously scientific corroboration. I mean, you only have to know that, in the Shastras, it says that the universe is billions of years old, and that is correct. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. So the ancient rishis, they knew this millennia ago, and they were correct. And you compare that to in the Abrahamic faiths, where, for example, in the Bible, it says the universe is only 6,000 years old. And, the argument falls down very, very quickly when you have the scientific evidence up against it. So there's scientific corroboration for Hinduism being the truth. There's just the sense, for me particularly, as a woman, that Hinduism has so much truth in it because women and femininity is so deeply worshipped in Hinduism. That Brahman, that single consciousness, it emerges in both feminine and masculine characteristics, in both female and male forms in Shakti or Mar Parvati, as well as Bhagwan Shiva or Bhagwan Krishnan. And so as a woman, I really appreciate that, coming from a religion before in Christianity where God was a man who sent his son. And the only women in there, they have very sort of limited roles and aren't very inspiring individuals. You look at the diversity of Shakti and just how empowering that is for a woman. So in that way, I feel there is evidence for Hinduism being the truth. Another way in which I feel there is evidence for Hinduism being the truth is that when you consider that Bhagwan has created so much beauty in this universe, the intelligence that was involved in creating this existence, how could such a magnificent entity have so many flaws? For example, in the Christian faith, it's stated in the Ten Commandments that if anything other than that male god is worshipped, particularly in the form of like a murti, in an object, a material object, if that is worshipped, you are damned. How could Bhagwan, such a magnificent Bhagwan who has created this existence with all its beauty and all its diversity, be so narrow-minded and so egotistical? It just doesn't make sense to me at all. It's not logical. And would that same Bhagwan be so narrow-minded in imagining that humanity has to be insulted by saying you have to live your life according to these 10 very black and white commandments, which aren't relevant to modern times? They're context dependent, and yet those 10 commandments are set in stone. Wouldn't this magnificent Bhagwan empower the beings that it has created to be understanding what is right and wrong for ourselves? And that is what dharma is, that we each have the ability, the consciousness to make decisions on what is dharmic or adharmic, right or wrong for ourselves. And that, these right and wrong decisions aren't black and white, they're nearly always grey, that they are context dependent. The other thing that I feel is a demonstration of the truth of Hinduism is that it explains why there are such differences between people. And I mean in terms of, some people are born more beautiful than others, some are born more talented than others. If everyone has just one life, wouldn't God put everyone on a level playing field to be able to determine, who should enter heaven or not, go to hell. And yet when everyone has such a different starting point, such different challenges presented in their lives, some babies are, they die the day they are born. How can that judgment be passed at that time? So the idea of having many lives, of reincarnation, of karma, building up karma and undoing your karma through dharmic duty, it makes so much sense. It then explains why one person is born more talented than another person, because we're each on our individual journey. We each come with different sort of baggage and experiences and karma. So it all makes very logical sense to me on a practical level. So as I mentioned, nature is so diverse, and that is why that polytheism is so relevant and accurate, I feel. And that is why there are different paths to achieving moksha, or yog, which means union with God. And that's because in nature there is such diversity. People have such different temperaments. I look at myself in the Ayurvedic sense. When I look at my doshas, I am Vata Kapha dosha. My husband, on the other hand, he is Pitta Vata dosha, and that is why we respond to different events in our lives in different ways. Something that makes him angry at one point won't really even bother me, and vice versa, and why I'm more predisposed to a certain type of illness than he is, and he's predisposed to a different type. So people are very different, and so there needs to be different paths for people to follow to be able to progress towards moksha, because there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution here, unlike in the other faiths where, doing your prayers every day, going to church on a Sunday, there is this one-size-fits-all approach. There isn't that in Hinduism. It respects the diversity, the beauty of diversity in the world. So there are 4 main ways in which you can progress towards yoga. The first is Gyan Yoga, or knowledge. So that's things like gaining understanding of what is the truth in this Maya. So Maya here meaning like illusion of this reality here. So understanding what is the truth of this reality, and particularly the truth of your ego. What is your ego? Be able to sort of see that separate from yourself. Then there is Bhakti Yoga. That's the second path towards moksha or yoga. Bhakti Yoga meaning devotion, and that is singing kirtans, reciting mantras, reading the Shastras, doing puja, and doing seva or service. And here when I'm talking about seva, it is pure service. It means not doing service to boost your ego in any way. And I make this point because Christians, they often feel that they're doing good in the world, charitable work, but it's always with the agenda of trying to convert people, because that then makes them feel good, because that's what they feel their duty is, that their duty is to get to heaven themselves by being a good Christian in the sense of doing your prayers every day, going to church every Sunday, and then converting other souls to Christianity. And in that way, they're actually boosting their ego because they feel like they're achieving something. In Hinduism, we don't feel that way as well. That's not seva. Seva is doing pure service because it is the right dharmic thing to do. It is. The third path towards moksha is karma yoga, or action. So doing good things in your life to be undoing any of the sort of bad things. If you want to see it in a really simplistic way, to be undoing the bad things that you may have done, or the bad decisions or choices you made in your past lives. You need to undo this karma before you can attain moksha. And finally, the fourth path towards moksha is Raja Yoga, which is meditation, pranayam, yoga asanas. And so there are all these different paths because, as I mentioned before, people come in such diversity, such different temperaments. So there can't be a one-size-fits-all approach. You know, in my case, I find Raja Yoga by far the most difficult. I may do my yoga asanas or my pranayam for a few days in a row, and then I kind of forget about it for a while and I may come back to it. Whereas, I go into the mandir every day and I do puja, arti to Hanumanji, my Ishtadev, every day, and I sing Hanuman Chalisa every day. And, I'm very interested in understanding the truth of reality, listening to lectures on Vedanta. So these things come much more naturally to me, even though, Raja Yoga doesn't come so naturally to me, but that's totally fine. And everyone needs to know what is their, ideal, most effective path for them. So what do all these paths have in common, though? They all have in common that there's this understanding of karma, of rebirth, of reincarnation, that we are all connected to Bhagavan, but Bhagavan is everything. There is a single consciousness, not just for humanity, but for animals and life and everything in existence. It's Bhagavan, it's Brahman. And that is why we worship murtis, because we see Bhagavan in murti, just as we see Bhagavan in everything, but in a murti especially, perhaps. So that's a central sort of tenet of these paths. And another is that there is a sense of inquiry, of trying to seek the truth, not just believing something because we're told it, but actually seeking the truth and then experiencing it for ourselves. So these are the sort of common characteristics of these paths. And as you can tell, these are in complete contrast with the beliefs in the Abrahamic faiths. In fact, if you believe in karma, or you believe in rebirth, or that you believe in physical experience and connection with Brahman, these are damnable beliefs in the other faiths. So how can the best belief in one faith be the worst belief in another faith if they are the same? It can't be. So that is why it's very clear that all religions are not the same, because the best in Hinduism, the best beliefs in Hinduism are the worst beliefs in the Abrahamic faith. So all religions are not the same. And this is important because I hear many Hindus, including Hindutva people, saying that they go from the point of saying that they respect all religions, which is fine. You can respect people to believe in what they want to believe, as long as it's not harming you and the environment and other animals. It's not adharmic. They can believe what they wish, but they then take the next step, and this is when they go too far to say that when the Shastras are talking about many paths to Moksha, that includes other religions, that you can be a very devout Christian and achieve Moksha. And that just isn't true, because, as I mentioned before, the core beliefs in Hinduism of karma, Bhagavan being a single consciousness that we're all part of, they are damnable in Christianity. So those different paths I mentioned towards moksha, they are Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga. They are not Christianity, they are not Islam. In fact, you can just think of this sort of analogy of, we're sitting on the globe, and you can make progress up the Hindu mountain towards moksha, if you want to put it in very simple terms. You can make progress up that Hindu mountain through Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga. Now, if you're a very devout Christian, you can make progress up the Christian mountain by doing Christian things. And, actually the best things for Christians to be doing is to be telling people who aren't Christians that they're damned and helping them then to convert to Christianity so their soul is saved, so that they can go to heaven and not to hell. But what they're doing in converting people, in imposing their faith on other people, perhaps even tricking them into converting, is they are strengthening their ego. They're feeling better about themselves. They are thinking bad things about other people. So that's not good, that they're building bad karma in that way. And they're also building bad karma if they're actually going to the extent of tricking Hindus, for example, into converting to Christianity. And as we know in India, those sort of practices are completely rife. So as they're making progress up their Christian mountain, we can imagine, because their beliefs are in complete contrast, opposite to the Hindu beliefs, their mountain actually is probably on the other side of the globe. So as they're making progress up their mountain, they're actually moving further and further away from Moksha up here, right? On the north side of our globe. Whereas if we take an atheist, perhaps, caring about animal welfare, a vegetarian, genuinely caring about people, they could actually be undoing some of their karmas and, without knowing it, moving up that Hindu mountain. So I think with that demonstration, you can hopefully see how being a strong Christian or a strong Muslim can actually mean you're moving away from moksha. So in summary of this whole talk, what are the key takeaway messages? So the first is that Hinduism is not a religion in the Abrahamical sense of being, blind faith, but is rather a worship of nature, of experience, of self-development, of truth. Now, there may be strategic times when we have to refer to it as a religion, and especially we need to be careful of not saying it is a way of life. And I've given real concrete reasons why we mustn't do that. It's very dangerous. And finally, there are many paths to moksha, yes, but these paths all must be consistent with the sort of central beliefs of Hinduism. And Abrahamical faiths, they can actually move you away from moksha, because what is considered the best of belief in Hinduism is considered a damnable, the worst type of belief in these other religions. So it's very clear that all religions are not the same. So my plea is, please don't say all religions are the same. That is used as a technique again by the missionaries, because what they do is they say, many paths to moksha, that can include you worshipping baby Jesus. And then before long, they'll say, why don't you make baby Jesus your Ishtadev? And they'll poison your ears about, Hanumanji, let's say. And before you know it, you're totally converted into a Christian. And I can see examples of this in friends and family in India. I have family who say their Ishtadev is baby Jesus. This is happening right before our eyes. So we really must stop this naivety by saying, in saying all religions are the same. Logically, it's just not possible. So please stop saying it. And why do I make this video and other videos? It's because I'm so passionate about the survival of Hinduism, because it is the solution to a sustainable world, to sustainable subsistence, to animal welfare, to the environment, to humanity being healthy and happy. So we need to do everything we can to firstly be clever to ensure that its survival continues. But secondly, we need to be standing proud and loud in saying that we are unapologetic in being Hindu, and that we do offer the solutions for the world. And that ultimately it is our greatest dharma to be protecting Hinduism and promoting it. We all need to be doing it. So that's my plea to you all, please. Please be unapologetic Hindus. Dhanyavad. Jai Shri Ram.